I teach music at a public middle school in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm 27 years old. Some people say I look older, maybe because of my thinning hairline and light beard. I never actually planned to be a teacher. I used to dream of touring with a band, but life doesn't always go the way you expect. Now here I am, standing in front of 23 seventh graders, teaching them how to play keyboard and cajon. This happened on a Wednesday 2 years ago. I remember because I had plans to watch a basketball game after school. It was supposed to be a normal day. It was almost 2 p.m., just before dismissal. The kids were practicing in small groups. Some were on keyboard, others were working on vocals. It was the usual, lively, a bit noisy. I was in the corner of the room tidying up speaker cables when suddenly the lockdown alarm went off. At our school, the lockdown alarm is different from the fire alarm. 3 short beeps, a pause, then it repeats. Every teacher and student knows that pattern. We usually have at least one lockdown drill each semester, but there wasn't one scheduled that day. The principal always announces drills a day in advance. At first, I hoped it was just a technical error. But then the hallway lights dimmed. That's part of the real lockdown protocol. My stomach dropped. I stood up, clapped my hands softly, and said, "Stop. Turn off the keyboards." The kids went quiet immediately, though some still looked confused. I walked to the door, locked it, and pulled the shade over the window. It's a large window. If the lights are on inside, anyone outside can see everything. Once the door was locked, I turned around. "We're going to the storage room, now," I said. The storage room is in the corner of the music room. It's where we keep extra drum sets, rarely used guitars, and big speakers. It's small, but enough to hide in. Some of the kids started getting nervous. I said, "It's okay. We're just practicing the procedure." We moved into the storage room. It had that distinct smell: wood, dust from old instruments, maybe some lingering paint. I turned off the main room light before closing the storage door. I didn't turn on the storage light either, so the only light came from the crack under the door. I stood closest to the door. The kids sat on the floor with their knees tucked in, pressed against the back wall. Some held hands. Nobody spoke loudly, just a few whispers. About 5 minutes passed, just the sound of breathing. Then slowly, I started to hear footsteps in the hallway. Not the sound of kids' shoes. These were heavy, slow steps, deliberately slow, like someone wanted to be heard. The steps stopped right in front of the music room. I held my breath. My hand instinctively reached for the storage room's handle, even though it didn't have a separate lock. Outside, I heard someone try the music room door. Once, twice. It didn't open. Then a knock. 3 times, soft. Then a voice, a man's, deep, but trying to sound younger. He said, "Mister, it's me. I got stuck in the bathroom. Please open up." I didn't respond. I tried to remember if anyone was missing. I was sure all the kids were here. But in moments like that, logic can slip away. I almost replied, but I saw the kids watching me. I knew that if I opened the door and was wrong, I could put everyone in danger. The voice outside was still there. He knocked again, louder this time. "I know you're in there. I saw the light. Just open the damn door." My hand stayed on the door. I held my breath. Then I heard the door handle rattle hard. Some of the kids started to cry. One girl in the back started shaking. I raised my hand to my lips, signaling silence, trying to calm them. The voice turned into shouting. He started kicking the door. Once. Twice. I heard a keyboard crash to the floor, knocked over from a table. The sound made my heart race. The man yelled, kicked again, but the lock held. Minutes passed. Felt like an hour. Then silence. The noise stopped completely. No more banging. No footsteps walking away. Just silence. We stayed in the storage room. No one dared to speak. A few kids whispered, "Sir, is he gone?" I didn't answer. I don't know how long we stayed in there. It felt like more than half an hour. Finally, the intercom came on. The assistant principal said the police were in the building and we should stay in place until officers arrived. A few minutes later, someone knocked gently on the music room door. This time, it was the voice of a police officer. They checked in, asked how many students we had. We walked out one by one, heads down. The hallway was full of police. A few teachers stood nearby, holding back tears. Later, we learned the intruder was a 22-year-old man. He got in through the side auditorium door. It hadn't been locked. He had a kitchen knife in his black backpack. He wandered the halls for a while before fleeing through an emergency exit. Police caught him in a nearby park. Thankfully, no one was hurt. I still think about what would have happened if I had opened that door. Maybe he would have attacked without hesitation. Even now, whenever I hear a knock late at night, I remember that man's voice pretending to ask for help. Since that day, I always make sure the music room door is locked, even during lunch breaks. That's a lesson I'll never forget for the rest of my life. I was a medical student at a university in Ann Arbor. No need to say which school. When the lockdown was enforced in 2021, the campus turned into a ghost town. We lived in dorms, and our movement was strictly limited. We were only allowed out to go to the lab, the library, or the clinical rooms, all on a strict schedule. No in-person classes, no normal campus activities, just empty corridors, dim lights, and a growing sense of isolation. I lived in room 214, second floor, West Block, alone. My roommate went home to Virginia during the second week of lockdown. I stayed. Not because I was stronger, just not very close to my family. And I thought a quiet campus would be the perfect place to focus on studying. At first, it was. But in early November, things started to feel off. That day was overcast and cold. I had just finished my lab shift at around 5 in the evening, carrying a canvas bag with a reflex hammer, a stethoscope, and a small notebook. As I walked home along the path behind the biology building, I felt like someone was following me. Slow footsteps, steady, not too close, but close enough to make me aware. When I turned around, no one was there. I figured it was just paranoia, lockdown stress, maybe. But that night, when I sat down to rewrite my lab notes, my notebook was gone. I was sure I had put it in my bag. I searched until midnight. Even went back to the lab through the side entrance. Nothing. 2 days later, my reflex hammer went missing from my desk drawer. That's when I realized it wasn't just about forgetting things. Still, I tried not to panic. Then one night in the middle of the month, I returned from a small convenience store on the north end of campus. I had only bought milk and cereal. It was dark. Frost coated the sidewalk. I walked faster. And again, I heard footsteps behind me. This time they weren't shy, not trying to hide. Sometimes slow, sometimes quick, as if trying to match my pace. When I turned around, I saw him. A tall man, gray hoodie, black cloth mask. I didn't know him, but the way he moved, I could tell. He wasn't just someone passing by. His steps were heavy, straight toward me. I sped up. So did he. When I reached the corner near the arts faculty garden, he yanked my hood from behind and shoved me into the bushes. I hit the frozen ground hard. He was on top of me in seconds, one cold hand over my mouth. His mask smelled like damp cloth left in a dark, wet place for too long. His other hand reached for my neck, hesitant, like he was searching for the right grip. I fought back, kicked, scratched, but he was much stronger. Then a car pulled over suddenly on the side of the road. The horn blasted. 2 people ran toward us, a middle-aged man and a woman wearing a thick scarf. They shouted at him. He ran off immediately. The woman held me tightly. The man had chased him briefly, but came back. They walked me to the entrance of the dorm. Before leaving, the woman said, "Lock your door. Don't open it unless you recognize the voice." They left before I could ask their names. I didn't report it, not to campus security, not to the police, not because I was brave. I just wanted to erase it, pretend it didn't happen. I stayed in the shower for almost an hour that night. When I returned to my desk, my notebook was there, placed neatly. On the first page, a note was written in pen. "Your room light is too bright at 1 a.m. Don't forget, I'm always watching you." My hands trembled. I didn't write that. Since that night, I stopped sleeping with the light on. I never opened the window. And every night, I logged the time I heard footsteps outside my door. The first time, it was 1:04 a.m. 3 soft knocks on the door. No footsteps walking away. No sound. It happened every night. I never responded, never opened the door. But every time I heard those knocks, my breath caught in my chest. One night, I peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but I knew someone had been standing there just moments before. Weeks went by. The knocking continued until the last night. The first snow had fallen in Ann Arbor. I was up late studying for finals. At 1:04 a.m., 3 knocks came, as usual. I stayed silent. But 30 minutes later, more footsteps. 2, maybe 3 people. They stopped right outside my door. Then the sound of metal. Someone trying to force the door open with the wrong key. Whispers. I grabbed my phone from under my pillow. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the screen. Then came a loud crash in the hallway. A cabinet falling. A short scream. Running footsteps, or maybe someone being dragged. I hid behind my desk. A few minutes later, there was another knock. This time firm, steady. "Campus security. We've secured the suspect. Can you open the door?" 2 officers stood outside. One was holding a walkie-talkie. Their faces were serious, but with a touch of relief. "We got a report from someone on the 3rd floor about loud noises," one of them said. "We found someone right outside your door. Daniel." I knew exactly who it was. Daniel, a 3rd-year student from the South Block. I had seen him a few times in the lab. Quiet, lingered too long around the equipment cabinets, often stared up at the dorm windows from the garden. They found my reflex hammer in the pocket of his hoodie. But that wasn't all. On his phone, they found hundreds of photos. Some were anatomy diagrams, textbook images or lecture slides, but many were clearly not. Some had been taken in secret, from behind lab lockers, outside dorm windows, even through cracks in the faculty restroom doors. There were photos of me sitting on my bed, photos of me asleep at my desk, wearing the hoodie I wore just last week. All looked like they were taken with a hidden camera. Some files were named 214lighten.jpg, sketchbookback.jpg, 3rd floor night 1.png. Many were timestamped around 1:04 a.m. After that night, Daniel was expelled, banned from campus. The knocks at 1:04 a.m. never came again. No more footsteps in the hallway. No more breath behind the door. I stayed in that room until graduation. But ever since that night, I've known one thing. Not everyone who studies the human body is doing it to heal. This happened back when I was in college, not too long ago, around my 3rd year. On Thursdays, my schedule was a bit loose. I had a 1.5-hour gap between 2 classes. Usually I use that time to grab lunch or work on assignments. But that day, I wasn't hungry, and I needed a quiet place to prepare for a presentation. Instead of going to the library or a common area, I decided to head to one of the older buildings that wasn't used much anymore. It was called Building 3. It used to belong to the literature department, but most of the classes had been moved to a newer building. The place was still open, and some of the rooms were accessible. I'd been there before to study since it was quiet and not too far from my next class. I went up to the second floor and found an empty room. It wasn't very big, just enough for 2 or 3 people. There was a table and a power outlet, so I felt pretty comfortable. After sitting down and opening my laptop, I got to work. About 20 minutes later, I heard someone knocking on the door. "Excuse me," a man said. "I'm from campus security." I stood up and opened the door. Standing there was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He wore a jacket with the campus name on it and had an ID badge hanging from his neck. He gave me a brief smile. "We just got a report from the central system," he said. "There's a possible threat. Someone may have brought a suspicious item onto campus. We've been instructed to temporarily lock down some buildings and ask people to stay where they are until things are cleared up." I frowned. "I haven't heard anything about that." "It hasn't been officially announced yet," he said. "Still under investigation. I'm just checking the rooms to make sure everyone's safe." He seemed calm, not pushy. His tone sounded normal enough. He said it would be safer if I stayed put, and even offered to block the door from the inside, so no one could open it from the outside. "Just temporarily," he said. I hesitated, but since he had a badge and looked professional, I agreed. We moved a small shelf from the corner to block the door. After that, he sat in a chair near the window and looked at his phone. I returned to my laptop, trying to refocus. But the atmosphere had grown a little awkward. A few minutes later, he started making conversation. The questions were harmless at first. "What year are you in? What's your major?" Then shifted to things that felt a little off. "This building doesn't get much use anymore, huh? Do you come here alone often?" I replied casually. "Sometimes, when I need a quiet spot." He gave a slight smile and said, "Brave of you. Most students don't like isolated places." I didn't respond further. I picked up my phone and started checking for any updates about the lockdown he mentioned. But there was nothing. No messages from the campus, no emails, nothing on the official student group or university website. I began to feel uneasy. I messaged 2 friends who were also on campus. I asked if they'd heard anything about a lockdown or a suspicious person report. They both replied that they were in class and everything was normal. As I read their replies, I looked at the man. He was still staring at his phone, then glanced at me. "If you want, we can move to the room next door. It doesn't have windows. Safer in case things escalate." I didn't answer right away. "I'd rather stay here, thanks." He didn't insist, but his expression changed slightly, like he was disappointed or annoyed. A few minutes later, he stood up. "I think I heard something in the hallway. Might be the person we're looking for. We should probably hide under the table or behind the shelf." I looked at him. "If it's really unsafe, I think I should just leave the building." He stepped closer, not quickly, but close enough. "Just a moment. Let's wait until we're sure it's safe," he said. His voice was still calm, but it no longer felt professional. He stared at me a bit too long, then suddenly moved quickly toward me. "Come on now," he said, reaching for my arm. I flinched. His grip on my wrist was much too tight, stronger than necessary for just leading someone. I tried to pull away, but he didn't let go immediately. "You don't understand how dangerous it is out there," he said more urgently, almost forcefully. "I said I want to leave," I said louder. I yanked my arm back as hard as I could. He held on for a moment, then let go roughly. But that wasn't the end of it. Right after he let go, he stepped closer and raised his hand again, this time toward my neck. He didn't choke me completely, but it was enough to make me back away fast and scream. "Let go! Don't touch me!" I yelled. His eyes widened and his face tensed up. He looked at the door, then hurriedly pulled the shelf away, opened the door, and ran out without looking back. I didn't follow right away. I grabbed my things and waited about half a minute to make sure the hallway was empty before leaving. I went straight to the administration building and reported it to campus security. A few officers accompanied me back to the old building, but the man was gone. They checked the security cameras and building access records. It turned out the man wasn't listed as a staff member at all. Footage only showed him entering through a side door. No access card, no clearance. 2 days later, I was called to the campus security office to hear the results of their initial investigation. They confirmed that the man wasn't a campus employee and had no authorization to be there. They still didn't know who he was. They suspected he had posed as security to take advantage of how quiet the building was. The university apologized and said they would improve monitoring of underused buildings. They also promised to review access systems and patrol routines in inactive areas. I never heard any follow-up. I don't know if the man was ever caught. But since that day, I've never studied alone in an empty building again, especially one that's barely in use.